Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Hope you are having a great day, and today is Saturday. Hope all of you are doing great today, and I'm very happy to see you here. As you have clicked on the video, you might already be knowing that this video is going to be the basics of photography for all the beginners or also the professionals who want to brush up on their basics of photography. But before that, I would just like to say I'm really happy from the response I'm getting from you. I've already hit over 100 subscribers and my first video has 500 plus views. I love you all, and make sure to hit the subscribe button if you are new, like this video, and go follow me on Instagram. Before we get into this video, I would just like to say, I want you all to shift your camera from the automatic mode to the manual mode, and I want you all to promise me that you will never shift it again to the automatic or any other mode other than manual. So in today's video, we'll basically talk about the three components of photography which are the baseline, and you have to understand to start with photography as a professional, as a beginner, even if you are doing it as a hobby, because it opens a whole new perspective to photography. Each and every component plays an important role. We'll be talking about three components of photography, the basics, which will be our ISO, shutter speed and aperture. These three, if you set them perfectly, you'll get a perfect exposure. And now, what is exposure? Exposure is basically how will your photo or video look. Will it look a bit dark just like this, or will it look overexposed, like overly lit like this? So basically, better than having both of these, the perfect combination of these three will make the perfect photo or video like this. Coming to the first component, which is our ISO. ISO is basically the sensitivity of your sensor. How much amount of light does it capture? ISO ranges are different for many different cameras, and different cameras perform different on ISO ranges. But basically, as a tip, you can take it like, don't get your ISO above 1000 or 1200, because that would result in grainy pictures. Now, what is the role of ISO when you click a photo? Many times what happens is that you see a photo which has less lighting in it, which means the camera sensor was really less sensitive to the light. So however the light was given inside the lens or given to the camera, the sensitivity of the sensor was really less, so it couldn't capture the perfect colors, the perfect contrast or anything like that. So ISO plays a major role in setting the perfect exposure. It depends on your lighting conditions. Basically, if you have more light, you want your ISO to be really low because you already have more amount of lighting, so you want to equate that. If you have less light, like night photography or something like that, you want your ISO to be more. Try yourself out with your camera, spend your time with your camera. Every camera has a base ISO, which means the perfect or the best setting of ISO or the sensor on which it would capture the perfect photo. Like many a times what happens is that when you see some photos on Instagram which are like really grainy, or that might happen in post, but most of the time for photographer as a beginner, it results because of high amount of ISO. Before you even set your aperture or your shutter speed, ISO is the first setting you should do, because that doesn't depend on how you want the outcome to be. That depends on how much amount of lighting do you have. In bright sunny days, you want your ISO to be around 160 or even 100. Many a times you don't want the sensor to catch overexposed photos, because then you won't be able to get the sharpness, the clarity from your photos. Colors will be blown up, disgusting completely. Secondly, coming to shutter speed, basically you have a mirror inside DSLRs, and inside a mirrorless camera there is no mirror such like that, because mirrorless, and You get the point. So what happens is this mirror, like on a particular angle, and you have your sensor behind the mirror. So when this mirror flips up, the sensor is exposed, and when this mirror flips down, the sensor is covered. So basically the amount of time what the sensor is exposed is known as shutter speed. If you have like low light conditions, you might want to like increase your shutter speed to somewhat around 1 by 25th or 1 by 3rd of a second, but you'll for sure need a tripod if you're a beginner for that. But what this means is basically when 1/3 of a second, so these all are in seconds, so 1/3 of a second, 1 by 5,000th of a second is what the conversion is, and these normally crank up by doubles. So if you have 1 by 2/50th of a second, if you turn the rotor once by one stop, it will go to 1 by 500th of a second. How will it affect the end result is basically if you have more amount of light entering and you want to control it, you crank up your shutter speed to like really high, around like 1 by 5,000th or 1 by 2,000th of a second, basically in overexposed conditions or like in daylight. But at the same note, if you have like really less light and you want your sensor to capture more and more amount of light, you will want it to be exposed for a longer time. For example, in night photography, in astrophotography, in galaxy photography, something like this, you need your shutter speed to be really high. And just keep in mind, in having like higher shutter speeds, you'll have camera blur or like camera shake, because if you are a beginner, you don't have the particular stable hand. Even I don't, and whatever it is, so you need a tripod for really high shutter speeds. But this is the role of shutter speed. Coming to the third and the last component of the basics of photography is the aperture. Aperture is basically a hole between the blades of your lens. So basically how the photo is captured is that there are 8 blades inside your lens and they close together and form a small hole between. The hole between the 8 blades, when you click the shutter, is what is known as aperture. Aperture has two main roles on your end result or your photograph. Firstly, it controls the amount of light. So the numbers are for example inversely proportional to the size. So if you have a f22, it's a really small hole just like this or something like this, and if you have f1.4, f1.2, it is like really big. So that is like when you have f1.8 or f1.4, the amount of light entering will be really more, as you have more amount of surface area which is open. But if you have something like f22, you have really less light coming through this. So this controls the amount of light entering the sensor and like through the lens. Secondly, it is what forms the bokeh. I've talked about bokeh in my previous or like some videos which were regarding the prime lens. If you want to see, you can check them out on my YouTube channel. So basically what happens with the aperture is the smaller the aperture number, the bigger the hole, and the bigger the hole in the aperture, you will get more of the bokeh. So whatever you see on Instagram like food photography, product photography, or like portraiture is basically done with that big amount of hole, because it is what forms the bokeh or the background separation of your subject and background. So background becomes completely blur. So that is what happens if you have a f number as small as f1.8 or f1.4. In landscapes, basically what happens is you need a bigger amount of f number so that you have more amount of things, more amount of like sea or beautiful mountains with like snow-capped mountains or something like this. You want all of them to be in focus. So you have f number around like 16 or 12. Something like this would get a really big depth of field. Now depth of field is a really technical term, and what it means is basically the amount or like the length of a particular place which will be in focus while you click a photo. So f1.8 will have only, for example, only me in focus, but you have something like f16 or 22, so the depth of field will increase, like in this case it will increase like this. So in the background, like my TV or like my Mac would also be in focus together. So that is what is like the basics of photography, and these three components form the exposure triangle. And this triangle, if you get a perfect balancing of these three components, this is guaranteed that you'll get an absolutely a great shot. If you have a DSLR, I don't think that you should ever change to automatic mode or auto, because that is the worst settings. Like, you can take it straight in written from me, like these are the worst settings that your camera will get to click a photo. So you have officially reached the end of the video. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. Comment if you have like certain suggestions for my videos, for my feedback or anything like this. And before ending, I just want to know how many of you like oversized hoodies, because I really love them. It's summer here, but I still like turn on my AC and I want to be inside this hoodie. So comment below if you like the same. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new. I post certainly many videos, some videos, yeah, but I do post. So if you are into cinematography, photography or anything like this, make sure to follow me on Instagram. I'll leave the links in description, and hope you have a great weekend.